Hey there, welcome to my channel. I'm here to help you relax tonight. Though before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Let's enjoy the story. The first time my grandfather died, the room was full. There was the steady hospital beep, my mom's quiet sobs, my dad pretending not to wipe his eyes, nurses moving around like they'd done this 1,000 times. The air stank of hand sanitizer and old coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed. And then the monitor went flat. That long, straight tone cut through the room. My mom broke. My dad stepped back and stared at the ceiling like he could keep himself together if he didn't look at the bed. I just stared at my grandfather's chest, because I swear to you, I still heard his heart. Not through a stethoscope, not through a machine. I heard it in my head, in my bones. A slow, stubborn beat, like something that refused to quit. Thump. Pause. Thump. The nurse reached over him, pressed buttons, checked his neck, his wrist. She shook her head a little and started talking in that soft, practiced voice they probably teach them on the first day. "I'm so sorry. Time of death." Her voice faded out in my ears because my grandfather turned his head. Just a little. Everyone else was looking at the nurse. No one saw it. His eyes didn't open, but his lips moved. Barely. He wasn't breathing. The monitor showed nothing. The room had already started to shift into that weird, respectful silence, but his lips were moving. I leaned closer, pretending I was just crying over him like a normal grandson. His breath was gone. His mouth was dry. But somehow, his voice reached me anyway. "Not yet," he whispered, so faint it didn't feel like sound. "You'll know when it really stops." His lips went still. The last echo of his voice slipped away. The monitor was already flat. Everyone in the room thought my grandfather was dead. But in my head, his heartbeat kept going, and I was the only one who could hear it. The thing you have to know about my grandfather is this: he hated silence. His name was Henry, but everyone called him Hank. He wore old flannel shirts even in summer and smelled like pipe tobacco and peppermint. He lived in this narrow, crooked house on the edge of town that looked like it had been built before anyone invented straight lines. And inside that house, nothing ever stopped ticking. He collected clocks, dozens of them, all over the place. Fat wooden ones with brass pendulums, little plastic ones that looked like they came from dollar stores in the 80s. A huge grandfather clock in the hallway that chimed on the hour and a little off like it was drunk. If you stood in his living room with your eyes closed, it didn't feel like a room. It felt like the inside of a chest. Tick, 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 tick. Different clocks, different rhythms, some fast, some slow, some with a tiny hitch in their beat. As a kid, I used to lie on his old sofa and let the sound surround me until it all blurred into one big heartbeat. He'd sit in his armchair, holding his old pocket watch up to his ear. "Listen to that, Ethan," he'd say. "Long as something's ticking, you're not alone." He'd tap his chest with a bent knuckle. "Your heart is just a clock the body forgets to wind one day." My mom hated when he talked like that. She'd tell him to stop creeping me out. He'd wink at me when she turned away. When I was 12, a storm knocked the power out at his place. All the battery clocks kept going, but every electric one stopped at the same second, 11:33. I remember standing in the faint glow of his flashlight, looking at a wall full of frozen hands. "Creepy, right?" I said, trying to sound casual. He just smiled, calm as ever. "That's the funny thing about time," he said. "It doesn't stop just because the clocks do. But if the right clock stops," he tapped his chest again, "then you pay attention." After the hospital, after the paperwork and the quiet car rides and the casserole dishes from neighbors, the house felt wrong. Even before we opened the front door, I knew something was off. The air outside had that heavy end-of-winter chill, the kind that makes your fingers ache. My mom fumbled with the keys, red-eyed and silent. My dad carried a box of old photos like it weighed 100 pounds instead of 10. The instant the door swung open, my skin crawled. It was too quiet. I stepped inside first. That smell hit me, the mix of old wood, dust, coffee, and his aftershave. It was like he'd just left the room a minute ago. But the one thing that had always filled the house was gone. The ticking. Not one clock made a sound. My mom shuffled in behind me, sniffing. Dad followed, setting the box down on the hallway table. They were wrapped up in their own fog of grief, not really noticing anything yet. "You okay, Ethan?" Dad asked, his voice a half-forceful, half-soft thing he used on me when he didn't know what else to say. "Yeah," I lied. "Just weird being here." He nodded like that was enough. No one mentioned the silence. Maybe they didn't feel it the way I did, like a pressure in my ears, like the house was holding its breath. We spent the day sorting through his things, papers, clothes, old coffee mugs that he'd never thrown away. I found the chipped blue one he used every morning, the one with the faded lighthouse on it, and for a second I almost expected it to be warm. My mom kept stopping to cry over small things, a sweater, a photo, a book with his handwriting in the margins. Dad paced a lot. By late afternoon, they were burnt out. "Ethan," my mom said, rubbing her forehead, "your father and I need to go talk to the lawyer about the will tomorrow morning. It's an early appointment. I don't want to drive back and forth again. Do you mind staying here tonight? We'll be back by lunch." She said it like a question, but it wasn't one. She was already halfway out of the room. "Yeah, sure," I said. The idea of sleeping in that quiet house made my stomach twist, but the thought of making her feel worse was even worse than that. She kissed my forehead distractedly. Dad clapped my shoulder. "You call if you need anything, okay? And don't touch his tools," he added, trying to sound like his usual self. "Okay." They left when the sky was starting to go dark, the sun smearing red through the bare branches out front. The sound of their car faded down the road. The house closed in around me. I stood in the hallway and listened. Nothing. For a second, I thought about grabbing my coat and walking back to town. It would take an hour, maybe more, and it was already cold, but at least I wouldn't be stuck in here. Then, faint and far away, I heard it. Thump. I froze. My heart jerked in my chest. Thump. Not my heartbeat. Mine was a nervous, jumpy rhythm in my ears. This sound was deeper, slower. I followed it like someone following music down a hallway. It led me to the living room. All the clocks were there, just like always, on the walls, on shelves, on the mantel over the dead fireplace. Every single one had stopped. Some at different times, 2:47, 10:06, 4:13. But in the middle of that frozen forest of clock hands, the sound kept going. Thump, thump. It was coming from the big grandfather clock in the corner, the one with the cracked glass door and the brass pendulum that used to sway with this sleepy, stubborn rhythm like it had nowhere else to be. Now the pendulum hung still. I stepped closer. The wood creaked under my sneakers. My breath fogged the glass when I leaned in. Nothing moved inside, but the heartbeat was loud now. Thump, thump. I pressed my fingers against the glass, ice cold. Without thinking too hard about it, I reached for the key. The clock had a little brass key hanging from a hook beside it. Grandfather never let anyone touch it. He said people wound clocks too tight. "You rush them," he'd say. "Things break when you rush them." My hand shook as I lifted the key off the hook. I slid it into the slot and turned. Something inside the clock clicked. The heartbeat stopped. The silence crashed back in, heavier than before. My ears rang with it. For a full 2 seconds, I stood there, fingers still on the key, feeling stupid. Then, faint and slow, like someone waking up. Thump. The pendulum twitched. Thump. It swung, just a little. Thump, thump. The second hand started to move. The clock ticked. Not fast, not like the others used to, but steady. Tick, tick, tick. And inside my chest, my own heart synced up with it. For the next few seconds, I couldn't tell which one belonged to me. I didn't sleep. I tried. I lay down in the guest room downstairs, staring at the ceiling, listening to the grandfather clock in the living room. Its slow, heavy tick carried through the drywall like someone walking the same short hallway over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the hospital room. The flat line on the monitor, the nurse's sympathetic face, my grandfather's lips moving when no one else was looking. You'll know when it really stops. I rolled over and checked my phone for the 100th time. Past midnight. I should have put something on, a podcast, music, anything. But it felt wrong to cover the sound of that clock. It was like turning your back on someone while they were still talking. Around 1 in the morning, I finally got up. The house was dark. Streetlight slipped in around the edges of the curtains, turning everything a pale gray blue. I padded down the hall in my socks. The living room was a lump of shadows. The grandfather clock stood in the corner, tall and thin, like it was listening. Tick. Tick. I watched the pendulum swing. Something's weird, I thought, and that was when I realized what it was. Time. The clock said 12:14. My phone said 1:03. I checked another clock on the wall. 11:49. Another. 2:20. Every clock in the room was wrong. Even the grandfather clock I'd wound. I stood there, phone in hand, screen glowing on my face, surrounded by clocks that didn't agree on anything. And under all those dead and dying ticks, there it was again. Thump. Not from the clock, from upstairs. In his bedroom. A slow, heavy beat, like someone's heart. For a full minute, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the staircase that disappeared into the dark. Every horror story I'd ever heard or watched or told myself said the same thing. Don't go up there. But this wasn't a movie. There was no creepy soundtrack building, just the real sound of my own breathing and that steady, impossible thump above me. My feet started moving before my brain could talk me out of it. The wood of the stairs creaked under my weight, the way it always had. That part was normal. That almost helped. Halfway up, my phone screen went black. It didn't die. I'd charged it before bed. It just shut off, like it got tired. I thumbed the power button. Nothing. The only light now was that thin gray blue creeping in from the windows. At the top of the stairs, the heartbeat got louder. Thump. Thump. His bedroom door was cracked open. That door had been closed when we left earlier. I knew it. I remembered my mom standing there in the doorway that afternoon, staring at the bed and shaking before Dad gently pulled the door shut. I pushed it open. The room smelled like him. Old paper, soap, that faint, sharp scent of medicine. The bed was neatly made. My mom must have done that in some fragile attempt to control something, anything. Nothing moved. The sound was coming from the far side of the room, from the nightstand, from his old pocket watch. It lay there on the scratched wood, on top of his closed reading glasses. I knew that watch like I knew my own hands. He'd had it for as long as I'd been alive. Heavy silver case, tiny hinge, a little chain that hooked to his belt loop. The lid was closed, but I could hear it. Thump, thump. Not a tick, not that quick, sharp sound clocks make. This was thick, wet almost, if a sound can be wet. Foolish thought, but that's how it felt. Like a heart. I reached out. My fingers hovered over it. Every hair on my arm stood up, like my body was backing away, even while my hand moved forward. The metal was supposed to be cold. It was warm, like skin. I snatched my hand back with a sharp breath. "Okay," I whispered, voice shaking. "Okay, okay." There was no one to say it to. Just the bed, the dresser, the chair by the window where he used to sit and fall asleep with a book in his lap. And the watch, still beating. "Grandpa?" The word slipped out before I could stop it. The heartbeat didn't speed up, didn't slow, just kept going. Thump, thump. "You're dead," I said, louder, like I was accusing him. Nothing. The clock in the hallway chimed once, except it wasn't 1 o'clock, not on my phone, not on anything. The sound drifted into the room and fell flat. I stared at the watch. He'd told me once, when I was younger, that this watch had been passed down from his father. "Old junk," my mom had said. "He just won't let it go." "It's not junk," he'd snapped, sharper than I'd ever heard him talk to her. Then he saw my face and softened. "Sorry, kiddo. Just some things matter more than they look." He'd tapped the watch. "One day, it'll be yours. Not yet, though. You don't want it yet." Back then, I thought he meant I'd just break it or lose it. Now, standing in his empty room, his heartbeat in a metal shell on a nightstand, I wasn't so sure. My fingers closed around it. The moment I picked it up, the sound flooded me. It wasn't in the room anymore. It was in my hand, running up my arm, sliding into my chest. Everything else dropped away. The house, the dark, my own breath. For a second, there was nothing but his heart. And under it, buried deep like a whisper under a song, his voice. "Don't rush it," he said. Then, just like that, the sound cut off. The watch went silent. The weight in my hand was just metal again. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of something waiting. The second time my grandfather died, I was on the couch. Morning light pushed through the curtains, weak and pale. I'd never gone back to bed. I'd sat in the living room with the watch on the coffee table in front of me, staring at it like it might start moving again. Every now and then, I'd lift it to my ear. Nothing. The grandfather clock ticked steadily behind me. Tick, tick. My phone had turned itself back on around 3 a.m. like nothing had happened. Its screen now said 8:50 when the feeling hit. It was like someone reached into my chest and knocked once, hard, on my heart. Thump. I grabbed my shirt, gasping. The room tilted. The ticking of the clock slowed. Not actually, but that's how it felt. Tick, tick, tick. I could feel something else in there with my own heartbeat, something that had been moving with it all night, quiet and patient. I hadn't noticed until it shifted. Now, it stumbled. Then, it stopped. Right as my mom texted that they were on their way back, a weight lifted off the house. I don't know how else to describe it. The air felt thinner, lighter, and in that exact moment, sitting on my grandfather's sagging old couch, my hand over my chest, I knew. He was gone. Not hospital gone, not paperwork gone, really gone. His heart, whatever part of it had been hanging on, whatever rhythm had lived in the clocks and the watch and the walls, had stopped. No one felt anything in that moment but me. My mom probably rummaged in her purse for tissues. My dad probably gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, thinking about bills and arrangements and everything left to do. The town kept moving out there. In here, the ticking returned to normal speed. The grandfather clock swung along, unbothered. The pocket watch on the table was just a watch. When my grandfather's heart stopped beating, I thought, only I knew. The sentence landed like a stone in my stomach, and then, slowly, something else followed it. Now what? The answer didn't come right away. The funeral was a blur. People in dark clothes hugging and whispering, stories about him that felt too small, about fixing cars for free for neighbors who couldn't afford it, about babysitting kids who weren't his, about making the best chili anyone had ever had. No one talked about the clocks. No one talked about the watch. No one talked about how, when the pastor said, "He's in a better place now," I heard a faint tick behind the coffin. Not loud, not obvious, just a tiny, stubborn beat that faded before the service was over. I didn't say anything. How do you bring that up? "Hey, Mom, did you hear Grandpa's heart at his own funeral?" She was barely keeping it together as it was. After the burial, after the food and the awkward laughter, and everyone telling us, "If you need anything, just call," I ended up back at his house again, alone. My parents thought I'd gone home. I told them I needed some air and walked. Instead of heading toward our place, my feet took me back to that crooked little house at the edge of town. The key was still in my pocket. The living room looked exactly the same. Clocks on the walls, grandfather clock in the corner, couch, chair, coffee table. The only difference was the pocket watch. It wasn't on the nightstand anymore. It sat in the dead center of the coffee table, like it'd been awaiting. I hadn't put it there. I stepped closer. "Okay," I said out loud. My voice sounded small. "If this is grief making me insane, can you just pick a lane? Either I'm losing it or something's actually happening. This in-between crap sucks." Nothing answered, but the watch ticked. Not loud, not slow and heavy like before either. Just a normal, polite tick. I stared at it, half relieved, half annoyed. "Really?" I muttered. "Now you're normal?" I picked it up. The ticking didn't change. It didn't slide into my arm or flood my chest. It stayed where it was supposed to be, inside the little metal case. I flipped it open. The hands on the tiny face pointed to 3:17. My phone said 2:43. "Great," I said. "You're a liar too." There was an engraving inside the lid. I'd never noticed it before. The silver was worn around the edges, but the letters were still clear. "For H. Harris. When it chooses you, listen." I rubbed my thumb over the words. "When what chooses me?" I said. The house answered with a soft creak somewhere in the walls. It sounded like someone shifting their weight. I turned slowly, heart thumping, half expecting to see him standing in the doorway. Old flannel shirt, soft eyes, crooked smile. No one was there. But one of the smaller clocks on the wall, a cheap plastic one with fading numbers, started ticking again. Then another. then another. Their beats didn't line up. None of them matched the time on my phone or on each other. Some raced, some lagged. It should have sounded messy, chaotic. Instead, standing in the center of that room, pocket watch warm in my hand, it all wove together into one tangled rhythm, like a whole family of hearts beating in the same house. That thought, for some reason, scared me more than anything else so far. Over the next week, the house didn't leave me alone, even when I wasn't in it. It started small. I'd be in my bedroom at home trying to do homework, and my heart would hiccup, just once, a weird offbeat jump. I'd freeze, hand on my chest, waiting for something awful to happen. Nothing did. But in that instant, I'd hear a faint tick, not from any clock I owned, from somewhere else, somewhere far away. Slowly, the ticks lined up with things. When my dad got quiet and distant at dinner, staring at his plate, I'd feel a drag in my chest and hear a slow, tired tick. When my mom would start crying in the bathroom with the water running, thinking I couldn't hear, there'd be this quick, fluttery rhythm in my ears. Once, during class, the lights flickered. Everyone groaned. The teacher sighed. My chest tightened. In the flash of darkness, I saw the outline of my grandfather's house in my mind so clearly it was like I was standing out front. A clock chimed. I flinched in my chair. "You okay, Ethan?" the teacher asked. "Yeah," I said, "just tired." At night, I dreamed of clocks. Not bloody nightmares, not monsters, just rooms full of clocks, all beating like hearts. Sometimes there was a chair in the corner. Sometimes a shape sat in it. I'd try to look, but I'd always wake up before I could see its face. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? "Hey, Mom, I think Grandpa's house is watching us? Listening? I don't know." I went back there, over and over, more than I'm willing to admit. Each time, something was different. A new clock ticking. Another one stopped. The grandfather clock never matched my phone. Sometimes it was 5 minutes behind. Sometimes an hour ahead. Sometimes it ran backwards for a few seconds while I watched, like it was thinking about something and changed its mind. The pocket watch always sat on the coffee table when I walked in, always ticking, now, always warm. It was on the 7th visit that I found the box. It was in the hall closet, behind a stack of board games and an old vacuum cleaner that had probably died before I was born. I wasn't looking for it. I just needed something normal to do with my hands, so I started cleaning, pulling things out, sorting piles, telling myself I was helping my mom, even though I knew she hadn't asked me to. The box was plain, dark wood, medium-sized, no fancy carvings, just a small brass lock on the front. My name was scratched into the top. Not carved nicely, scratched, like someone had been in a hurry or angry. Ethan. I sat back on my heels and stared. "I didn't do that," I whispered. My skin crawled. I tried the lid, knowing it wouldn't open. It didn't. I searched the closet for a key. Nothing. The only keys in the house that I knew of were the ones for the doors and the one for the grandfather clock. I sat there for a full minute, the box between my knees, heart pounding. Then I did the stupid thing. I went to the living room and grabbed the pocket watch. It ticked calmly in my hand. "I swear," I muttered to no one, "if this works, I'm leaving forever." I pressed the top of the watch against the lock. There was a soft click. The lid of the box popped open. I stared at it. "Of course," I said, because what else was there to say? Inside were letters. Dozens of them, yellowed, wrapped in a fraying piece of twine. The handwriting on the top one punched me straight in the chest. It was my grandfather's. "To whoever it chose next," the first one said in shaky pen. My mouth went dry. I opened it with careful fingers. The letter inside was short. If you're reading this, it means the watch picked you. I'm sorry. I tried to keep it. I tried to be better than my father. Didn't work. There are some things you can't just decide you're done with. You don't need to forgive me. You just need to listen. My hands shook. The next letter was longer. Then another. And another. I sat on the floor and read until the light outside shifted from afternoon gold to evening blue. By the time I reached the last page, my grandfather felt less like a person and more like a trail of ink and regret. The story that unfolded across those letters wasn't neat. It rambled, doubled back. Names showed up without explanation. Years passed from one paragraph to the next. He was old when he wrote them, tired. But some things were clear. The watch had been his father's, and his father's before that. No one knew where it came from originally. Some said great-grandfather had stolen it. Some said he'd found it on a night no one wanted to talk about. What mattered was this: it never stayed with someone forever. One day, he'd written, it starts to feel different, warmer, heavier. You hear things in its tick that aren't there. It picks someone. You won't be able to hide it, he wrote. You'll try. God knows I tried. I didn't want it to be my son. He's not built for it. He's already hard. The watch makes hard people worse. My throat tightened when I read that, because I knew who he meant by my son. My dad. I thought about breaking it, another page said, hammering it, tossing it in the river, but it doesn't like that. I don't know how to explain it better than that. The last time someone tried, the clocks in this house went mad. Animals died. My brother didn't wake up. There were lines scratched out after that, whole sentences he'd tried to write and then destroyed. The best you can do is steer it, he wrote in the end. Give it to someone who might listen, someone who notices things, someone who feels too much instead of too little. The last letter was only one sentence. I'm sorry, Ethan. Ink blotched at the end of my name, like his hand had been shaking. The room felt smaller when I finally looked up. The clocks were all ticking, every single one. Fast, slow, forward, backward. The sound was a mess. My heart raced, trying to keep up with something it couldn't find. The watch in my hand felt like a small, heavy sun. You could have told me, I said. My voice bounced off the walls and came back thinner. You had time. You could have warned me. Nothing answered. But for the first time, I realized the horror sitting under everything. He had warned me. You'll know when it really stops, he'd said. He wasn't just talking about his body. He was talking about the moment the watch let go of him and took hold of me. That moment on the couch when my chest hurt and the house got light. That was the second time he died. And the first time I realized something else was now beating alongside my own heart. You might think the twist here is that I went evil, or that the watch possessed me, or that I started doing things and couldn't remember them. That would at least be simple. It wasn't like that. Nothing obvious happened. That's what made it worse. Days went by. I went to school, took tests, answered fine when people asked how I was. The watch stayed in my pocket. It never left my side. Not because I loved it or because I wanted it, but because I was terrified to let it out of my sight. Terrified my dad might find it, or my mom, or someone else who wouldn't listen. Little things started to feel off. Time slipped. I'd think 10 minutes had passed, but an hour was gone. I'd lie down to sleep, roll over, and suddenly it was almost morning. Like someone had cut chunks out of my night and taped the edges together sloppy. I heard things. Not voices exactly, not words, more like rhythms. Walking down the street, I'd hear the heartbeat of the guy jogging past me, the jittery stop-and-go rhythm of a kid on a bike, excited and scared of traffic, the deep, slow thud of the old lady at the bus stop, each beat a stubborn push. I knew things I shouldn't. My friend Josh laughed too loud at lunch. Everyone else joined in. I smiled, but I heard this tiny skip in his laugh, a crack in the rhythm under it, and I knew he'd been crying in his car before school. I knew my teacher wasn't angry when she snapped at us. She was exhausted. I knew my mom hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night since the funeral. This doesn't sound like a horror story yet, maybe. Being more aware. Being more tuned in. But it never turned off. Every room I walked into, I heard every heart, every weak spot, every fear mapped out in tempo and weight. My own heartbeat tried to keep up with all of them and got lost. I'd lie in bed at night and feel my chest racing, not because I was in danger, but because everyone around me was. And under all of it, always, was the watch. Thump, thump. Its beat was calm, centered, like an anchor. If I pressed it to my ear, the noise of the world settled. Everything lined up. My heart slowed. The other rhythms faded. It felt good. Too good. That scared me more than anything. I started going back to my grandfather's house less. Being near all those clocks while feeling this way was too much, like walking into a crowd when you already can't breathe. The house didn't like that. The less I visited, the stranger things got. I'd wake up and find my shoes by the door, muddy, even though I didn't remember going out. I'd check my phone and see missed calls from the house phone, the landline, the one that shouldn't have had my number stored anywhere. Once, half asleep at 2 in the morning, I answered without thinking. Hello? Static hissed in my ear. Then, under it, faint and muffled, don't rush it. His voice, my grandfather's. I hung up so fast my hand hurt. The next day, I went to the house. The grandfather clock in the hallway read the right time. The other clocks were frozen. The watch on the coffee table ticked. I'm here, I said, feeling ridiculous. Happy now? The front door blew shut behind me with a soft click. The house exhaled. I felt it in the floorboards under my feet, in the walls, in my spine. The ticking picked up, like all those clocks had just been waiting for me to walk in. The third time my grandfather died, nobody noticed that either, because by then, what counted as him and what counted as me had gotten tangled. It happened on a Sunday. My parents and I were sitting around our kitchen table. The sunlight was too bright. My mom was trying to get me to talk about college. My dad was quiet. He'd been quieter lately. Not distant exactly, just watching. I caught him looking at my pocket a lot, where the watch always was. He hadn't said anything. Yet. So, my mom said, poking at her eggs, your guidance counselor said. The room blurred. My chest went cold, then hot. For a second, I wasn't at the table. I was back in the crooked house, standing in the living room. The clocks were all gone. Every one. Bare walls, empty hooks, pale circles where they'd hung for years. Only the grandfather clock remained. Its case was cracked. Its pendulum was still. The hands had fallen off the face, lying on the bottom behind the glass like little broken bones. The silence in that room pulsed. You don't realize how loud silence can be until you've heard a house full of ticking. Then it's unbearable. In the center of that silence, sitting in his armchair, was my grandfather. For the first time since the hospital, I saw his face clearly. He looked tired, not scary, not rotting, just old and tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for too long. "Hey, kiddo," he said. His voice sounded normal. "Grandpa?" My own voice echoed weirdly. "Are you? Am I?" "Doesn't matter," he said. "We don't have long." He tapped his chest, or where his chest should have been. His hand went straight through, like smoke. "That's done," he said. "Nothing left in there." I swallowed. "So, what? It's all in me now?" He shrugged, like we were talking about the weather. "Not all. Enough. More than I wanted." "Why me?" The question burst out, sharp and desperate. "Why didn't you just let Dad take it, or someone else? Why drag me into this?" His eyes softened. "I told you in the letters." "I don't care about the letters. I'm asking you." He leaned forward in the chair, elbows on his knees, like he always used to when he was about to say something important. "Your dad," he said slowly, "is a good man in some ways, but he closes doors in his head, locks them. That watch would have rattled around in there with nowhere to go. It would have made him mean." He shook his head. "I saw enough of that with my father." He looked at me. "You're open. Too open, maybe. You see things, you feel them. You don't shove them down, not really, even when you try. The watch needs that. Otherwise, it pushes. It doesn't like being ignored." I thought about the nights I'd tried to pretend it didn't exist. The phone calls, the missing time, the muddy shoes. "What does it want?" I whispered. He smiled, small and sad. "Same thing we all want. To keep going." "That's it? That's it? That's not evil," I said. "No," he agreed. "It's not. But it doesn't much care how it gets what it wants. That's on us. That's the part we're responsible for. The choices we make while it's beating inside us." He leaned back, eyes closing for a second. "I did some good with it," he said softly. "You can feel when someone's about to give up, when their rhythm's about to stop. You can nudge, say the right thing, show up at the right time. You can keep hearts going that were ready to quit." He opened his eyes again. "I also did things I'm not proud of. Times I used what I felt to hurt people instead of helping. It's easy when you know where someone's weak." My stomach twisted. "Did you ever make someone stop?" I asked. His gaze met mine. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between us was enough. "I don't want this," I said. "I know. I don't want to hear everyone's hearts. I don't want to feel every crack in them. I don't want to wonder if I'm making my own choices or if it's steering me." "I know," he said again. "You could have broken it. I told you. I don't care what happened to your brother." The words came out louder than I meant. "I'm not him. You could have tried again. You could have thrown it away, melted it, buried it. You chose not to." He winced like I'd hit him. "You're right," he said quietly. "I chose not to. I told myself I was protecting you. And maybe I was. But I was also scared. It's not easy to let go of something that's been beating with you for so long. You get used to it. You start thinking you are it." He spread his hands. "And then, one day, it lets go of you anyway." The room felt like it was leaning. "So what now?" I whispered. "Now," he said, "I stopped being anything at all. Watch or no watch, body or no body. I've stretched this out longer than I should have." He looked tired in a way no nap could fix. "Don't let it turn you into a coward," he said. "Use it or don't. Keep it or don't. Just don't do nothing." He looked past me at the broken clocks. "I stayed too long," he said, "listening to everyone else and ignoring the mess in my own head. Don't be me." The room dimmed. His outline flickered like a bad signal. "Late," I said, stepping forward. "Don't go. You can't just dump this on me and peace out. Tell me how to get rid of it. Tell me what I'm supposed to do." He smiled. "If I told you what to do, you'd just be me again." The chairs, the walls, the whole house started to fade. The last thing to go was the used-up shape of him in the armchair. "When my heart finally stopped," he said, voice thin and far away, "I was glad you were the one who knew." Then he was gone. The only thing left was the echo of a heartbeat, fading, and the steady, stubborn tick of the watch in my pocket. I blinked and I was back at the kitchen table. My mom was mid-sentence. "Just think it's good to have a plan," she said. My dad looked up from his coffee, frowning. "You okay, Ethan? You went pale." I swallowed hard. My chest felt lighter. Not empty. Not free. Just less crowded. Somewhere, very far away, a house settled into silence, dust drifting down onto bare walls. I reached into my pocket. The watch was there, cold, still, no tick, no warmth. I flipped it open with nervous fingers. The hands pointed to 12. Exactly. The second hand didn't move. The engraving inside the lid hadn't changed. "When it chooses you, listen." I pressed it to my ear. Nothing. The quiet wasn't full anymore. It was just quiet. My grandfather had finally stopped, really stopped. No secret beat hiding in clocks or in walls or in old metal. Gone. I knew it in a way I can't prove, in a way no one else could feel. He had let go. The thing inside the watch? That was another story. "Ethan?" My mom's voice was soft. "Sweetheart?" I looked up at them. Two people with their own messed up rhythms, their own hurts, their own secrets. They didn't know anything about ticking houses or cursed watches or tired old men who stayed too long. They just knew their son looked like he'd seen a ghost. "I'm fine," I said. And for the first time since the hospital, it wasn't completely a lie. Later that night, when the house was quiet and my parents were asleep, I took the watch out again. I sat on the edge of my bed, turning it over in my hands. I could keep it, use it, learn to listen on purpose, learn when to step in, when to pull back. Maybe do some good, maybe mess up, probably both. I could try to break it. Risk whatever my grandfather was afraid of. Maybe nothing would happen. Maybe everything would. Or I could do something he hadn't tried. I could put it somewhere time doesn't move the way we think it does. Somewhere it would be hard to find, but not impossible. Somewhere it could wait for someone who was ready to decide for themselves. In the end, what I did was simple. I put on my shoes. I walked to my grandfather's house one last time. The door creaked when I opened it. The clocks were all gone. The hooks on the walls were empty. The grandfather clock stood in the hallway, hands frozen at 12. Its face was cracked. Its pendulum hung limp. The house felt hollow without the ticking. Not evil, not haunted, just tired. I walked to the living room and set the watch on the floor. For a second, I hesitated. Then I slid it under the baseboard, into a narrow dark gap where only dust and lost things go. I pushed it as far as my fingers could reach. I sat back on my heels. "Someone will find you," I said, feeling stupid. "One day, or they won't. Either way, it's not my choice anymore." I stood up. The house didn't groan or shake or collapse. No angry wind blew through. No ghost appeared to scold me. The quiet stayed quiet. I walked outside, locked the door, and put the key in the envelope my mom had given me for the lawyer. As I headed back down the cracked little path, I felt my heart beating. Just mine. Fast because I was nervous. Strong because I was young. Imperfect because everyone's is. No other rhythm under it. No extra weight. No hidden beat. That doesn't mean the watch is dead. It doesn't mean the thing inside it is gone. It just means it's waiting. Houses get sold. Floorboards get ripped up. Kids explore places they're not supposed to. One day, someone else's fingers will brush against cold metal in the dark. They'll pull it out, blow the dust off, flip it open. They'll press it to their ear. Maybe they'll hear nothing. Maybe they'll hear a lazy, stubborn tick. Maybe they'll feel it warm in their hand, sliding up their arm and into their chest, settling beside their own heartbeat like it's always belonged there. When that happens, the watch will choose again. And when the heart that's living in there finally stops for good, whenever that is, someone will know. Only one someone. Because that's how this goes. When my grandfather's heart stopped beating, only I knew. When mine finally does, someone else will. And if they're smart, they'll listen.